Have you ever wondered how to create different card designs with just one die to stretch your supplies? In this video, I'll show you how to take one background die and use it in 3 completely different ways to create both masculine and feminine card designs. In card number 3, I'll share a cool twist on using this die to create something totally unexpected. I also have a bonus fun fold card idea that doesn't require you to make complicated score lines. So without further ado, let's get started with technique number 1. Today I'll be using dies from Kokorosa Studio, a company I just recently discovered. And just as an aside, look at the packaging. It's so cute with the little fox. Today I'll be using this brick wall style die in 3 different ways to create fun and unique card designs. If you want to buy anything from Kokorosa Studio, I'm excited to share a 25% discount code exclusively for my viewers thanks to Kokorosa Studio. Check out the video description for the code. The first card is going to be really fast and straightforward. Whenever I need to create a quick card, I turn to my trusty Pinkfresh Studio washi tape to make the focal point or embellishments. If you haven't used these before, they are paper tapes that come in repeating patterns. I'll stick down the washi tape on a piece of lightweight cardstock to prep it for die cutting. One great thing about washi tape is that it lifts easily if you need to reposition it and is really very forgiving. And any extra tape can go back on the roll. Pinkfresh Studio also makes coordinating dies, stamps, and stencils, but I'll be using only the dies today. The washi tape has a slick surface, so taping it down with more washi tape might still cause shifting. So to be safe, I'll use my magnetic mat from scrapbook.com and also use some washi tape for some added safety. The die is too large to cut in one pass, so I'll have to cut it twice from both sides. I'll store the die cuts and check if any parts need extra trimming. If needed, I'll tidy up the edges. I now have enough butterflies for this project, and I'll keep the extras for later. Next, I'll create the die cut from a separate piece of cardstock cut to a little smaller than A2 size, since I'll center the die carefully and cut it out. For this project, I'll use the die cut as an inlaid piece. To remove the die cut cleanly, I'll hold the die at an angle and use the Spellbinder's tool-in-one and roll the brush over the die instead of poking out each piece manually, because that would be time consuming, especially if it's a detailed one. It removes the negative pieces and easily releases the die cut. So let me first choose the butterfly so I can pick the background colors next. Here I have a couple of pattern paper pads with alcohol ink designs, and I'll choose a pattern with colors that will complement the butterflies. I want the card to be bright, cheerful, and feminine, so I'll stay away from the darker ones. I think I like this one the best. Since I want to retain this part, this should measure 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. This is a 6x6 paper, so I'll have a little slice left over and I can keep these scraps to decorate the envelope, or I can use them on another project. I want to keep a border so the patterned paper acts like a mat, so I'll trim 1/8 inch on each side. Now we have a bit of a border on all sides. Let's stick this down first. I started with using some Salmon Says Stamp macrodot sheets here. However, I mostly forget that I have it, and now the glue isn't as effective after sitting in my drawer for so long. As you'll soon see, I had to use liquid glue to adhere the die cut as it kept coming loose from the background. By using macrodots, you can avoid liquid glue oozing through openings, but unfortunately, as you'll soon see, I had to use liquid glue to adhere the die cut as it kept coming loose from the background. I keep some extra sentiments in this album. Hello Friend might be good, but I guess the farewell one fits best here. I think a black one would look nice. I'll raise the sentiment strip slightly, but I'll use these paper scraps instead of foam strips. Let's see if this height is enough, but maybe one more layer would be better. I usually save the strips while trimming down my cardstock and store them in this box. It's a great way to stretch your supplies, especially when you can save a few bucks and use it to buy something else. Why not, right? I'll now adhere the butterflies with liquid glue. I want the butterfly wings to have a little bit of lift, so I'll add tiny pieces of foam beneath one of the wings so it doesn't go flat on the card front. This is only the first of 3 cards, but before proceeding to the next card, I just want to add some embellishments. And instead of using gems or sequins, I'll use these pops of color. A great tip I learned from another crafter, Lucy Patrick, is to lightly tap the card to flatten out the drops. Whether you're using Nuvo drops, stickles, or any other liquids, this hack really works. What kind of embellishment do you prefer to use? Do you prefer drops or gems and sequins? I'm using the same die again for the second one, but I've also incorporated a couple of other dies. I've created another 10-fold card base and cut out an A2 size card front. I've created a little window on the card front using a small arch die. This dark green card panel will sit behind the card front, but I will trim it down just a tad from the sides to keep it out of sight. I've also pulled out another sentiment from my stash and might consider matting it with this green cardstock, but I'll decide later. Next, I've also used 2 of these nesting arch dies together to cut out a border. I also used the background die to create this gold die cut. The gold cardstock I'm using is from Recollections, which is the Michaels brand, and this paper pad includes various metallic papers. I also cut out a layer of lightweight white cardstock and stacked it behind the background die cut to give it some reinforcement and dimension. From cutting out the card front and the border, I now have 2 arches I can use for a different project. I needed some florals for the card front, so I used this die set to cut out a few flowers, and I'll color them using my Ohuhu alcohol markers, which are actually a lot more affordable option in comparison to Copic markers. I'll have the numbers listed with my other supplies in my blog post, and the link to that will be in the video description. I'll trim the green card panel first, and I've marked out how much I need with a pencil in case I want to map the sentiment strip with this. I'll also trim off the sides to ensure the green card panel is smaller than the card front. So now the green panel measures 3¼ inches by 5. Let's get the easiest part done first. I'll stick down the green card panel to the card base with my Barely Art liquid glue, ensuring it's centered so it doesn't stick out from behind the card front. Next, it's time for the gold arch. I used a generous amount of glue so I could slide it into position around the window. Liquid glue allows me a few seconds to get everything into place. Now I'll position this gold brick wall die cut behind the white card front and adjust the position behind the arched window. I'll first stick down the die cut in one corner with a little bit of glue so it doesn't move because I don't want to lose this placement. I won't need the entire piece, so I'll trim it down a bit before gluing the rest. I have this piece of release paper from some adhesive sheet I've used in the past, and I'll use it to press the die cut down so the glue doesn't get all over my fingers and of course the gold foil. If I see any bit of glue later, I can wipe it down with an eraser. I'll set it aside to dry and continue to the next step, which is going to be coloring in the flowers and foliage. I'm using alcohol markers for the coloring, and since I have a glass surface to work on, I don't have to worry about staining the glass permanently because I can clean it up easily with a spritz of rubbing alcohol. Once the coloring is done, I'll be back to finish the card. I've completed the coloring, but I noticed a small mistake. This one is actually a flower petal, but I mistook it to be a part of the calyx and colored it green. Anyway, I'll stick it in the background somewhere so it's not that obvious. Let me adhere the card front with some foam strips to give it dimension, after which I'll finish decorating the rest. I like to partially peel back the release paper on the foam strips because that prevents the card from getting stuck right away before I've had a chance to properly position it. I'll now arrange the flowers around the bottom right corner of the window. I want to fill this space, and I also want the flowers to be of different heights, so I'll shorten the stems a bit. Once I have my arrangement the way I want it, I'll use a piece of press and seal and lift off the arrangement from the card front, apply the glue, and place the arrangement back onto the window. This one clearly isn't stuck down, so paper strip to the rescue. Adhering anything to foil is challenging, so I'll use a generous amount of glue and place these magnets over the arrangement and let it sit for a couple of minutes so the glue has time to set. And once it's dry, I'll adhere the sentiment. First, I'll make this into a banner. I'll snip off one end at an angle and use the snipped end to replicate the exact angle on the other side. When I hold the cut end like this, I'll get the precise angle I made on the other side. The angle looks good here, but I need to remove a tiny slice from this side to center the sentiment. I'll again put my scrap strips of paper to good use. This is sturdy cardstock, but I'll apply a few layers and test the height. looks perfect, so I'll stick it down. The next card is where I use the same background die but with a different technique. Keep watching and I'll get to that as soon as I complete this one. Now this card is done and I'm finding this really pretty, so I'll keep it simple. I won't add embellishments because the gold already makes it elegant and looks perfect. Now let me show you what I did with this card. I used the same brick wall die I've been using so far, but I did something different. I didn't use a die cut for this. Instead, I used a piece of thick watercolor paper, used the die to cut out the pattern, removed the negative pieces, and placed it back into the card panel for ease of handling as if it were a stencil. Then I used white pigment ink and a paper pouncer to apply the white ink because pouncing will prevent the die from shifting, whereas using a brush has a high probability of exactly that happening. After stenciling, I added spatters with white paint and a paintbrush and used a vellum belly band to ground the sentiment. I cut out 2 labels using these circle dies and heat embossed the sentiment using the stamp from Dollar Tree. Next, I added this cute bow with a glue dot and this card is done. Now for the bonus card idea, although it uses a different die set. This one cuts out the entire design and creates a fun fold card. It also comes with an extra stitched piece to place over the flap, but you can also use it to create a little pocket and stuff it with flowers or something. The die also creates score marks, making it really easy to fold the card. After I cut the card base, I'll also cut out this additional piece using pattern paper. I found a cute scrap that fits perfectly. I'll be using 2 cardstock colors for layering later on. Cutting out this shape should be simple, but I'm worried the full length might not fit in my Spellbinder's Platinum 6 machine. I can see that part of the die is hanging off the cutting plate. Since it doesn't fit entirely, I'll need to pass it through once, then rotate the plates and pass it through again. But before that, I'll secure it to ensure that nothing shifts during the 2 rounds of die cutting. The cardstock came out a bit scratched up from all the marks on my cutting plates, but luckily I'll be covering most of it up with the colored cardstock. Now that the base is ready, I'll cut the other layers. With the die cutting done, I'll start assembling the card. For the layer that'll go on the card base, I'll just mark off where I need to cut and trim the cardstock down. I am ready to adhere everything. I'll use my Barely Art liquid glue again to attach the layers, ensuring all corners are properly secured. Next, I'll add the sentiment to the inside of the flap, but white on white seems too plain, so I'll just add the aubergine cardstock like a mat and then add the sentiment. I'm using a Dollar Tree stamp again, and I'll heat emboss the sentiment. The heat embossing didn't quite work out and looks like a regular stamp sentiment. Oh well. I think I waited too long before I added the embossing powder, and the ink had already dried a fair bit. I like the hidden sentiment here. This is done, and now I just need to add a few embellishments. I have this box of card bling, which is actually called card bling. I use the opaque iridescent light purple confetti to embellish the card front, and it adds a very subtle shine and shimmer. The inside is blank, but you can always add a greeting. And that's it. This card is done. I recently made a video to show you my insane collection of pattern papers and how I finally got up the courage to make 5 cards and another bonus idea with a few of the busiest patterns. Make sure you check out this video here.